The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as Ambassador Sarah Chen gathered her data tablets with deliberate precision. Around the circular amphitheater, representatives from 47 different species watched in stunned silence. The Zephyrian delegates' tentacles twitched nervously, while the insectoid Kriktar's compound eyes reflected the harsh overhead lighting like broken mirrors. "You cannot be serious," wheezed Council Prime Veltar, his three mouths speaking in unison through the universal translator. The elderly Nexari's gray skin had taken on an unhealthy purple hue. "Humanity has been part of this council for 12 standard cycles. You would throw away everything over a simple territorial dispute?" Sarah's laugh was bitter and sharp. She stood slowly, her modest human height dwarfed by most of the alien delegates, yet somehow commanding the entire room's attention. "Simple? You call the systematic extermination of an entire colony simple?" Her voice carried across the chamber without amplification, cutting through the artificial atmosphere like a blade. The human delegation behind her remained seated, their faces masks of controlled fury. General Martinez's scarred hands rested calmly on the table, but Sarah could see the white knuckles beneath his dark skin. Dr. Okafor's usually warm eyes had gone cold as Arctic ice. They had all seen the footage from New Harmony. The hegemony's actions were regrettable, admitted Counselor Yithron, the serpentine slith representative coiling and uncoiling nervously. But the colony was established in contested space. Such conflicts are inevitable when expansion occurs too rapidly. Regrettable. Sarah repeated the word like it tasted of poison. 50,000 men, women, and children reduced to ash, and you call it regrettable? She turned to face the hegemony delegation, where the insectoid prime warrior Zexthul sat motionless, his razor-sharp mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his kind. The footage had been clear enough. The Krathi hegemony's war forms descending on New Harmony like a plague of metal and fury. The colonists had been farmers, scientists, artists. They had possessed no military installations, no strategic resources. Their only crime had been existing on a world the hegemony decided they wanted. The territory was claimed under ancient Krathi blood right. Zexthul's translated voice buzzed through the chamber. The human infestation was removed efficiently. This council's own charter recognizes traditional territorial claims. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. Around the chamber, she could see it in their faces, in their body language, in the way they avoided eye contact. They were going to side with the hegemony. Again. "The Krathi hegemony is a founding member of this council," Prime Veltar said carefully. "Their territorial claims predate human membership by millennia. While we condemn the loss of life, we cannot ignore established precedent." "Then let me make something perfectly clear," Sarah said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Every being in the chamber strained to hear her words. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Consider this our formal notice." The reaction was instantaneous. Delegates leaped to their feet, tentacles waving, mandibles clicking, voices raised in a dozen different languages. The translation matrix struggled to keep up with the cacophony. "You cannot leave," shrieked the Velthari representative, her crystalline form resonating with distress. "The Council requires unanimity for such matters. Check your own bylaws." Dr. Okafor spoke for the first time, her voice calm and clinical. "Any member species may withdraw with 30 standard days' notice." "We're being generous by giving you 45. Sarah began walking toward the exit, her delegation falling in behind her. "We came here seeking justice. We found politics and cowardice instead." Prime Veltar's voice followed them. "Without the Council's protection, humanity will stand alone. The galaxy is vast and filled with dangers you cannot imagine." Sarah paused at the massive doors, turning back one final time. "Prime Veltar, with all due respect, you have no idea what humanity is capable of when we stand alone." The doors sealed behind them with a finality that seemed to echo through the chamber long after the humans had gone. In the silence that followed, none of the remaining delegates noticed the small smile that played across Zexthul's mandibles. The hegemony had plans for humanity, and now there would be no council protection to interfere. What they did not know, what none of them could have known, was that humanity had spent the last 12 years preparing for exactly this moment. The files that Dr. Okafor carried contained detailed intelligence on every council species' military capabilities, trade routes, and weaknesses. General Martinez's seemingly innocent questions during diplomatic receptions had mapped their defensive strategies. Humanity had learned long ago that when you sit at a table surrounded by predators, you had better be the most dangerous thing in the room. They had played the role of junior partners, eager students, grateful supplicants. But beneath the surface they had been preparing. As the human transport lifted away from the council station, Sarah allowed herself a moment of genuine emotion. Grief for the dead of New Harmony, anger at the council's betrayal, but underneath it all something else, something the aliens had never seen in humanity before. Anticipation. The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as Ambassador Sarah Chen gathered her data tablets with deliberate precision. Around the circular amphitheater, representatives from 47 different species watched in stunned silence. The Zephyrian delegates' tentacles twitched nervously, while the insectoid Kriktar's compound eyes reflected the harsh overhead lighting like broken mirrors. "You cannot be serious," wheezed Council Prime Veltar, his three mouths speaking in unison through the universal translator. The elderly Nexari's gray skin had taken on an unhealthy purple hue. "Humanity has been part of this council for 12 standard cycles. You would throw away everything over a simple territorial dispute?" Sarah's laugh was bitter and sharp. She stood slowly, her modest human height dwarfed by most of the alien delegates, yet somehow commanding the entire room's attention. "Simple? You call the systematic extermination of an entire colony simple?" Her voice carried across the chamber without amplification, cutting through the artificial atmosphere like a blade. The human delegation behind her remained seated, their faces masks of controlled fury. General Martinez's scarred hands rested calmly on the table, but Sarah could see the white knuckles beneath his dark skin. Dr. Okafor's usually warm eyes had gone cold as Arctic ice. They had all seen the footage from New Harmony. The hegemony's actions were regrettable, admitted Counselor Yithron, the Serpentine Slith representative coiling and uncoiling nervously. But the colony was established in contested space. Such conflicts are inevitable when expansion occurs too rapidly. Regrettable. Sarah repeated the word like it tasted of poison. 50,000 men, women, and children reduced to ash. And you call it regrettable? She turned to face the hegemony delegation, where the insectoid prime warrior Zexthul sat motionless, his razor-sharp mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his kind. The footage had been clear enough. The Krathi hegemony's war forms descending on New Harmony like a plague of metal and fury. The colonists had been farmers, scientists, artists. They had possessed no military installations, no strategic resources. Their only crime had been existing on a world the hegemony decided they wanted. The territory was claimed under ancient Krathi blood right. Zexthul's translated voice buzzed through the chamber. The human infestation was removed efficiently. This council's own charter recognizes traditional territorial claims. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. Around the chamber she could see it in their faces, in their body language, in the way they avoided eye contact. They were going to side with the hegemony. Again. The Krathi hegemony is a founding member of this council, Prime Veltar said carefully. Their territorial claims predate human membership by millennia. While we condemn the loss of life, we cannot ignore established precedent. "Then let me make something perfectly clear," Sarah said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Every being in the chamber strained to hear her words. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Consider this our formal notice." The reaction was instantaneous. Delegates leaped to their feet, tentacles waving, mandibles clicking, voices raised in a dozen different languages. The translation matrix struggled to keep up with the cacophony. "You cannot leave," shrieked the Velthari representative, her crystalline form resonating with distress. "The council requires unanimity for such matters." "Check your own bylaws." Dr. Okafor spoke for the first time, her voice calm and clinical. "Any member species may withdraw with 30 standard days' notice. We're being generous by giving you 45. Sarah began walking toward the exit, her delegation falling in behind her. "We came here seeking justice. We found politics and cowardice instead." Prime Veltar's voice followed them. "Without the Council's protection, humanity will stand alone. The galaxy is vast and filled with dangers you cannot imagine." Sarah paused at the massive doors, turning back one final time. "Prime Veltar, with all due respect, you have no idea what humanity is capable of when we stand alone." The doors sealed behind them with a finality that seemed to echo through the chamber long after the humans had gone. In the silence that followed, None of the remaining delegates noticed the small smile that played across Zexthol's mandibles. The hegemony had plans for humanity, and now there would be no council protection to interfere. What they did not know, what none of them could have known, was that humanity had spent the last 12 years preparing for exactly this moment. The files that Dr. Okafor carried contained detailed intelligence on every council species' military capabilities, trade routes, and weaknesses. General Martinez's seemingly innocent questions during diplomatic receptions had mapped their defensive strategies. Humanity had learned long ago that when you sit at a table surrounded by predators, you had better be the most dangerous thing in the room. They had played the role of junior partners, eager students, grateful supplicants. But beneath the surface they had been preparing. As the human transport lifted away from the council station, Sarah allowed herself a moment of genuine emotion. Grief for the dead of New Harmony, anger at the council's betrayal, but underneath it all something else. Something the aliens had never seen in humanity before. Anticipation. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after humanity's dramatic exit. Prime Veltar's usually composed demeanor had cracked, revealing the anxiety beneath his diplomatic facade. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as delegates filed in, their conversations a mixture of languages that the translation matrix struggled to parse. "This is unprecedented," announced Councillor Thexara, the crystalline Velthari's form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. "No founding species has ever withdrawn from the Council. The political ramifications alone could destabilize our entire alliance." Zexthul clicked his mandibles in what his species considered thoughtful contemplation. "Perhaps this presents an opportunity. Humanity has always been an unpredictable element. Their departure removes a variable we never fully understood." Economic advisor Miltaran, a slug-like being whose species had built their reputation on trade analysis, slid forward on his mobility platform. "The immediate economic impact is already measurable. Human trade routes handle 37% of agricultural distribution across the Outer Rim. Their manufacturing capabilities exceed most core worlds combined." Prime Veltar waved a dismissive hand. "Trade agreements can be renegotiated. What concerns me more is their military withdrawal. Humanity provides security for over 200 neutral systems." "Security?" Zexthol's translator couldn't quite capture the amusement in his voice. "Human military forces are adequate for peacekeeping, but they lack true combat experience. Their largest conflicts have been against pirates and smugglers." Councillor Yithran's serpentine form coiled tighter. "I disagree. Human adaptability in conflict situations is notable. During the Voidstalker crisis, their tactical innovation saved entire systems." "Desperation breeding creativity," Zexthol dismissed. "When faced with true military might, humanity would crumble. They are soft, emotional creatures who value individual lives over strategic necessity." The debate continued for hours, but beneath the political posturing, several delegates exchanged worried glances. The Zephyrians had been monitoring human communication since the withdrawal announcement. What they had discovered was troubling. Ambassador Kyle Andra of the Zephyrian Collective finally spoke, her tentacles weaving complex patterns of concern. "My intelligence networks report unusual activity in human space. Military vessels are converging on strategic positions. Their communications have gone dark on all diplomatic channels. Probably organizing some ineffective protest," scoffed the Krathi Prime Warrior. "Perhaps they intend to blockade a few trade routes. Let them. The hegemony's war fleets could crush their entire navy within a standard cycle." Economic advisor Miltaran's skin had begun shifting to a darker hue, a sign of distress among his species. The economic data suggests otherwise. Human industrial output has increased by 400% over the last 6 cycles. Their resource extraction operations have expanded into previously uncharted systems, and their population distribution, added Dr. Velkaran, the Council's chief xenobiologist. "Humanity has established colonies on over 3,000 worlds. Most appeared to be agricultural or research settlements, but recent analysis suggests many possess significant industrial infrastructure." Prime Veltar felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. "Are you suggesting they deceived us about their expansion rate?" "Not deceived." Dr. Velkaran's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Simply understated. While we focused on their core worlds and major colonies, they quietly spread across vast regions of space. Their actual territorial holdings may exceed several council species combined. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Zexthal's mandibles had stopped clicking. The hegemony had based their strategic assessments on human holdings of perhaps 50 systems. If the xenobiologist was correct, humanity controlled resources far beyond what any of them had imagined. How is that possible? Whispered Counselor Thexara. The Accords require all territorial claims to be registered with the Council. Human legal teams, Economic Advisor Miltaran spoke with grudging respect. They used corporate entities, scientific expeditions, and private ventures to establish footholds. Technically legal under Council Charter, but it created a paper trail so complex that no one realized the scope. Ambassador Kylandra's tentacles had gone rigid with shock. My sources indicate human military doctrine differs significantly from our assumptions. Their peacekeeping forces were never their primary military assets. They've been maintaining separate defensive fleets throughout their territory. How separate? Prime Veltar demanded. Conservative estimates suggest 10 times larger than their known council peacekeeping forces. Kylandra replied, possibly more. And their technology? She paused, her tentacles weaving patterns of uncertainty. There are indications they've been developing systems in isolation, without council oversight or collaboration. Zexthal finally spoke, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. You're suggesting humanity has been preparing for conflict while maintaining diplomatic relations? I'm suggesting humanity has been preparing for survival, Kylandra corrected. The pattern resembles species that have experienced existential threats. Their entire expansion strategy appears designed for self-sufficiency and defensive depth. The realization hit the chamber like a physical blow. Every delegate began accessing their own intelligence networks, cross-referencing data they had previously dismissed as insignificant. The picture that emerged was terrifying in its implications. Humanity hadn't been the grateful junior partner they had appeared to be. They had been studying, learning, preparing. Every diplomatic exchange had been an intelligence-gathering operation. Every trade agreement had been carefully calculated to support their hidden expansion. Every military exercise had been a test of alien capabilities and weaknesses. They played us, Prime Veltar said quietly. For 12 cycles, they played us all. In the silence that followed, each delegate began to understand that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The humans were no longer bound by council law, council oversight, or council protection. They were free to act according to their own judgment, using resources and capabilities that none of the aliens had fully comprehended. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity was making its first moves in a game whose rules only they truly understood. The first sign of change came exactly 30 days after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council. Trading vessels throughout the galaxy began reporting the same phenomenon. Human cargo ships simply weren't arriving at their scheduled destinations. Within 48 hours, the economic ripple effects began cascading through civilized space. On the industrial world of Kepler 442b, the Velthari crystal farms that supplied processor cores for half the galaxy's communication networks ground to a halt. The specialized nutrient solutions that fed their silicon-based crops came exclusively from human agricultural worlds. Without those shipments, entire sectors would lose interstellar communication within weeks. Economic Advisor Miltaran's skin had shifted to deep purple, a color his species reserved for economic catastrophe. His mobility platform hovered before the emergency assembly screen, showing trade route disruptions across 17 sectors. The situation is deteriorating faster than our worst projections. Human suppliers handled critical infrastructure support for over 60% of council space. Prime Veltar's three mouths moved independently, a sign of severe stress among his people. Surely we can find alternative suppliers. There are dozens of species capable of agricultural production. Not at this scale, Miltaran replied, his voice carrying undertones of despair. Human agricultural efficiency exceeds galactic average by 300%. Their worlds produce food for populations across 200 systems. The Outer Rim colonies depend entirely on human grain shipments. Counselor Thexara's crystalline form resonated with anxiety harmonics. What about their medical supplies? The bioenhancement serums? Dr. Velkaran accessed his medical database with trembling claws. Catastrophic. Human biochemical research provided treatments for 17 different species-specific diseases. The longevity treatments for the Nexari leadership alone represent irreplaceable medical technology. Irreplaceable? Prime Veltar's voice cracked. Human medical research operates on principles we haven't fully understood. They seem to approach biological problems from angles that don't occur to other species. Without their research facilities and pharmaceutical production, we're looking at medical regression across multiple worlds. The assembly chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Each delegate was beginning to understand the true scope of humanity's integration into galactic civilization. They hadn't simply been participants. They had become essential infrastructure. Ambassador Kylandra's tentacles wove patterns of urgent communication as she accessed Zephyrian intelligence networks. The military situation is more complex than we anticipated. Human defense forces are not withdrawing from their territories. They're consolidating. Consolidating how? Demanded Zexthul, though his mandibles had lost their earlier confidence. Every human military asset is pulling back to defensive positions around their core systems. They're abandoning their peacekeeping commitments but maintaining full territorial control. 23 different conflicts that were under human mediation have erupted into open warfare. The implications struck the assembly like hammer blows. Without human peacekeepers, ancient territorial disputes were reigniting across the galaxy. The Slith Confederacy had already launched raids against Velthari mining operations. The Zephyrian Collective was mobilizing fleets to settle border disputes that had been frozen for decades. How many active conflicts? Prime Veltar asked weakly. Kylandra's tentacles moved in intricate patterns as she processed incoming data. 47 separate military actions as of this morning. The humans were providing stability for regions spanning hundreds of systems. Without their intervention capabilities, we're looking at widespread regional warfare. Zexthul shifted uncomfortably. The Krathi hegemony had been planning to exploit human withdrawal for their own territorial expansion, but the cascade of conflicts was threatening their own supply lines. This is temporary instability. Order will be restored once new power balances establish themselves. At what cost? Dr. Velkaran's voice carried a weight of scientific analysis that chilled the chamber. Human peacekeeping wasn't just military force. They provided humanitarian aid, disaster relief, and refugee support across dozens of systems. Without those capabilities, we're looking at population displacement on a scale not seen since the Voidstalker crisis. Economic advisor Miltaran displayed new data on the central screen. The refugee crisis alone will overwhelm most council species' social support systems. Human relief operations handled population movements for entire sectors. Their logistics networks were managing food distribution for over 2 billion displaced beings across the galaxy. The numbers painted a picture of impending civilization-wide collapse. Trade routes failing, conflicts erupting, medical supplies dwindling, refugee populations growing exponentially, and no single species possessing the resources or infrastructure to fill the gaps that humanity had left behind. We need to contact them, Prime Veltar said desperately. Open diplomatic channels. Negotiate some form of emergency cooperation agreement. Kylandra's tentacles drooped in defeat. We've tried. All official diplomatic channels have been terminated. Human embassies throughout council space have been evacuated. Their communication networks are responding to emergency humanitarian requests only, and only for immediate crisis situations. Then we make this a humanitarian crisis, Zexthul declared, his warrior instincts finally recognizing the true scope of the threat. Declare a galactic emergency. Demand they honor their moral obligations to civilian populations. On what authority? Councillor Thexara's harmonic resonance carried bitter irony. They're no longer bound by council law or council obligations. We made that very clear when we sided with the hegemony over the New Harmony massacre. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full weight of their situation became clear. They had treated humanity as a junior partner, valuable but replaceable. Instead, they had driven away the keystone species holding their entire civilization together. Somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity was watching, waiting, and the galaxy was beginning to understand that they had made the most catastrophic diplomatic mistake in recorded history. The humans hadn't just walked away from negotiations. They had walked away with the infrastructure, resources, and stability that made galactic civilization possible. The footage from the Kepler 438 engagement spread through galactic communication networks like wildfire. Within hours, every species in Council space had access to tactical recordings that fundamentally challenged their understanding of military technology and human capabilities. The Krathi hegemony's complete defeat by forces that operated beyond known physics sent shockwaves through every military command structure in the galaxy. Prime Veltar convened the Council in emergency session, but the chamber that had once buzzed with confident political discourse now hummed with barely controlled panic. The delegates who had dismissed humanity as an expendable junior partner were facing the reality that they had driven away the most technologically advanced species in known space. The weapon signatures don't match anything in our databases, reported military analyst Kethamoran, her usually steady voice cracking under stress. Gravitational manipulation at this level requires understanding of physics that surpasses our theoretical frameworks by centuries. Zexthul, his pride shattered, but his tactical mind intact, had transmitted detailed battle reports before his humiliation became public knowledge. The human vessels appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our targeting systems couldn't establish locks because the ships weren't entirely present in our spacetime continuum. Economic Advisor Miltaran's skin had shifted to a sickly yellow, indicating economic terror. The implications extend beyond military technology. If humans possess this level of scientific advancement, their civilian capabilities must exceed our assumptions by similar margins. Dr. Velkaran's xenobiological expertise provided the most chilling assessment. The precision of their weapon systems suggests understanding of biological functions at the quantum level. They disabled Krathi biomechanical ships by manipulating the living components directly. This indicates medical and biological technology that could theoretically control any known life form. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the implications. A species with the technological capability to manipulate biology at the quantum level could theoretically cure any disease, enhance any organism, or perhaps most terrifyingly, control any sentient being. Ambassador Kylandra's tentacles wove complex patterns of distress as she shared Zephyrian intelligence assessments. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive construction projects throughout human space. Structures on scales that dwarf anything in recorded galactic history. Some appear to be larger than entire star systems. What kind of structures? Prime Veltar demanded, though his voice carried the weight of someone who already feared the answer. Unknown configuration. The energy signatures suggest they're constructing something that operates outside our understanding of engineering principles. Whatever they're building, it's designed for purposes we can't even theorize. Counselor Thexara's harmonic resonance carried undertones of crystal fracture, indicating severe psychological stress. We need to consider the possibility that humanity's participation in the Council was never about joining galactic civilization. They may have been studying us. The realization hit the chamber like a physical force. 12 cycles of diplomatic exchanges, technological sharing, cultural interaction. All of it could have been an extended research project. Humanity gathering intelligence on every species, every technology, every weakness in galactic civilization. The medical assistance they provided. Dr. Velkaran's voice was barely above a whisper. They studied our biological systems under the pretense of helping. They now possess detailed knowledge of every species' physiology, genetics, and psychological patterns. Economic Advisor Miltaran accessed historical trade data with trembling appendages. Their economic integration wasn't dependence, it was mapping. They know every supply chain, every resource distribution network, every point of vulnerability in galactic commerce. And their peacekeeping missions. Military analyst Kethamoran added with growing horror. They observed every species' military doctrine, weapon systems, and tactical capabilities while posing as mediators. The scope of humanity's intelligence operation became clear. A systematic study of galactic civilization that spanned over a decade. Every interaction had been calculated to gather information while revealing as little as possible about true human capabilities. Zexthul's warrior instincts recognized the pattern. They've been preparing for war. Not defensive preparations, strategic preparation for conquest. No, Prime Veltar said quietly, his 3 mouths speaking in unison for the first time in cycles. They've been preparing for independence. Everything they've done suggests a species planning to survive without galactic civilization, not conquer it. The distinction was crucial. A conquering species would need to maintain existing infrastructure and populations. A species planning for independence would simply need to ensure that no external force could threaten their survival. Ambassador Kylandra's latest intelligence reports painted the picture more clearly. Human territories are becoming increasingly isolated. They're cutting communication links, withdrawing from all joint ventures, and establishing what appears to be a completely self-sufficient civilization. They're abandoning us. Counselor Thexara's harmonic resonance carried notes of crystalline despair. Not conquering, not negotiating, simply leaving us behind. The implications were staggering. Humanity possessed the technological capacity to solve most of the galaxy's problems. The medical knowledge to cure diseases, the agricultural expertise to end hunger, the military capability to enforce peace, the engineering skills to build infrastructure beyond current imagination, and they were taking all of it with them. Prime Veltar's political mind finally grasped the true scope of their mistake. They offered us partnership, equal participation in advancing galactic civilization. We chose to treat them as subordinates and side with genocidal warmongers instead. What do we do? Economic advisor Miltaran asked, his voice carrying the weight of species-wide economic collapse. The question hung in the chamber's artificial atmosphere like a toxin. Every delegate understood that their civilizations were now entirely dependent on resources and stability that humanity had provided. Without human agricultural output, medical research, peacekeeping forces, and economic infrastructure, galactic civilization faced collapse within standard cycles. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity was building something that operated beyond their comprehension, using knowledge gathered from 12 cycles of studying species that had never realized they were being analyzed. The Council had wanted to negotiate from a position of strength. Instead, they had driven away the only species capable of maintaining galactic stability and discovered that their perceived strength had been an illusion all along. The humans had walked away from negotiations, and the galaxy was finally beginning to understand what they had lost. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the message arrived simultaneously at every major communication hub in Council space. It bypassed security protocols, overrode encryption systems, and transmitted with perfect clarity across languages and species barriers. The technological sophistication required for such a broadcast demonstrated capabilities that made even their previous displays seem primitive. Ambassador Sarah Chen appeared on screens throughout the galaxy, but she was no longer the diplomatic figure who had walked out of the council chambers. She wore the deep blue uniform of the Human Colonial Administration, with insignia that no alien database could identify. Behind her, visible through what appeared to be a transparent aluminum viewport, massive structures moved through space like living cities. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had characterized her species throughout their diplomatic relationship. "I speak to you today not as a representative seeking council membership, but as the elected voice of the Terran Federation, an independent stellar nation encompassing over 3,000 systems." The number struck the listening delegates like a physical blow. 3,000 systems represented territorial holdings larger than several council species combined. The humans hadn't been hiding their expansion. They had been understating it by orders of magnitude. Recent events have demonstrated fundamental incompatibilities between human values and council governance. Sarah continued. The systematic extermination of New Harmony Colony was not an aberration but a pattern. Council records show 47 similar incidents over the past century, each time resulting in political compromises that sacrificed innocent lives for diplomatic convenience. In the council chamber, Prime Veltar's skin had taken on the gray pallor that among his species indicated approaching death. The human archives they were referencing contained classified information that should have been impossible to access. Humanity has observed this pattern with growing concern. Sarah's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes suggested depths of emotion carefully controlled. We have attempted to work within council frameworks to prevent such tragedies. Those attempts have failed consistently. The broadcast shifted to display star charts showing the current state of galactic civilization. Red zones marked active conflicts, yellow indicated economic instability, and a spreading pattern of orange showed refugee movements and humanitarian crises. Nearly 60% of Council space was marked with indicators of crisis. In the 6 months since our withdrawal, 43 separate conflicts have erupted across Council space. 12 species face imminent economic collapse. Medical emergencies threaten populations on over 200 worlds. The Council's response has been to convene committees and schedule diplomatic sessions while civilizations burn. Prime Veltar found his voice, though it cracked with desperation. What do you want from us? Terms for negotiation? Reparations for past grievances? Sarah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture that suggested profound disappointment. Prime Veltar, you still don't understand. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to inform you of decisions already made. The star chart changed, showing human space outlined in blue. The territory encompassed not just the 3,000 systems Sarah had mentioned, but vast regions of previously unexplored space, extending beyond current galactic maps. The Terran Federation has concluded that galactic civilization is currently structured as incompatible with basic moral principles. We will no longer participate in systems that enable genocide through political compromise. We will no longer provide economic support to civilizations that choose warfare over diplomacy. We will no longer offer our protection to species that refuse to protect others. Economic advisor Miltaran's desperate voice carried across communication channels. The humanitarian crises, surely human medical knowledge could save millions of lives? It could, Sarah agreed quietly. And it will, but not through council channels. The display changed again, showing new territorial designations. Hundreds of systems previously under council authority now showed different classifications: Terran Protectorate, Humanitarian Zone, and Neutral Territory. Any world that renounces aggressive warfare and accepts basic humanitarian principles may apply for Terran Federation protection. We will provide medical assistance, economic support, and defensive guarantees to civilizations that demonstrate commitment to peaceful coexistence. The implications were staggering. Humanity was offering an alternative to Council: membership, protection, and support for species willing to abandon the political structures that enabled conflicts, like the New Harmony Massacre. Zex, Thul's voice carried none of its former arrogance. And those who refuse? Those who maintain their traditional territorial claims? Will be left to manage their own affairs. Sarah replied with finality that carried the weight of absolute decision. The Federation will not interfere with internal Council politics. We will also not permit Council conflicts to spread beyond your current boundaries. The threat was clear without being stated. Humanity would contain Council civilization within its current territory, preventing expansion into Federation space while offering refugee status to any population that sought alternatives. This is blackmail, Prime Veltar protested weakly. This is evolution, Sarah corrected. Galactic civilization has reached a crossroads. You can continue with political systems that prioritize territorial disputes over sentient life, or you can adapt to new realities. The broadcast began to conclude, but Sarah's final words carried implications that would reshape the galaxy. To species considering Federation membership, our application process requires demonstrable commitment to peaceful coexistence and humanitarian principles. To Council leadership, our territorial boundaries are now established and will be defended with capabilities you've witnessed. To everyone else, her voice softened slightly. Remember that the choice between civilization and barbarism is made daily through small decisions. The Federation exists for those who choose civilization. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. In the span of 30 minutes, humanity had fundamentally altered the political structure of the galaxy. They had offered an alternative to council authority while making it clear that continued aggression would be contained within current boundaries. Over the following weeks, the applications began arriving. Dozens of species, entire stellar nations, and individual worlds seeking Federation membership rather than continuing under Council authority. The humans had offered something the Council never could: protection based on principles rather than politics. As Prime Veltar watched his civilization fragment between those seeking Federation membership and those clinging to traditional Council power structures, he finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. Humanity hadn't walked away from negotiations in anger or frustration. They had walked away because they had evolved beyond the need for such negotiations. They had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species powerful enough to enforce their moral principles across interstellar distances. The Council had thought they were losing a junior member. Instead, they had driven away the species that would define the future of galactic civilization, and the worst part was knowing that it had all been preventable. If they had simply chosen justice over politics at New Harmony, humanity might have led the galaxy toward the peaceful coexistence they now offered, only to those willing to abandon the Council entirely. The humans had walked away from negotiations, and the galaxy would never be the same.